The average person in the US makes just above $3,000 a month. These guys made over $300 million a month for every month that they worked together. They worked together for 5 years, and they ended up selling, anybody know which app? WhatsApp, exactly, to Facebook for $19 billion. Anybody familiar with this brand? Care to admit publicly? Ashley Madison. It's an online dating website for married people after they're married. Somebody's writing it down. AshleyMadison.com. But hold on, let me tell you more. So there was a big hack, and the database was leaked to the public. And to this day, we know that 4 men have committed suicide because their names were implicated in the database. Looking at the same database, we also know that the ratio of active male to female users on the website was 20 million for 1,500. 20 million men for 1,500 women. You're scratching it out. Not a good website. Would those men have committed suicide if they had known? Probably not. Probably not. This gentleman was traveling on our favorite airline, United, and he received his guitar broken. So he wrote in, he called, he asked for repairs, he asked for a new guitar. He didn't get anything. So he wrote a song about it and posted it on YouTube. In the 3 days following posting the video on YouTube, it went viral, and the market cap of United Airlines dropped by $150 million. In this latest episode, when the doctor was dragged, the market cap dropped by $450 million. The point here is that our assumptions about how economies function no longer seem to hold true entirely because of exponential technology. So we need to revisit some of these assumptions and think about how economies function, how businesses function, and what our individual strategies should be. I call this exponential economics or exonomics. And this is going to be a journey where we talk about the 7 pillars of economics. We're going to talk about people, property, production, price, power, policy, and prosperity. And I'd like to point out that this is a journey that connects people to prosperity. And that is very much the spirit of what we're discussing here. Let's begin with people and how technology is empowering us to do things that we could have never done before on our own. You're about to watch an accident. Please don't be alarmed. Nobody died. But have a look, and we'll talk about what happened just before the accident. So this is the dash cam of a Tesla that is automatically braking. I'm going to replay the video. This time we're going to pause when the first beep, the first alarm is sounding. Does this look like an accident to you? It doesn't. This is entirely 1.7 seconds before the actual accident happens. The car is modeling what's happening 2 cars ahead and is saying, no way they're going to be able to stop, and is preventing that accident. This is technological empowerment and technological protection. Now, a little bit of bad news. There seems to be strong evidence of unequal exposure to the benefits of technology. If you look at net productivity over the last 40 years, you see the steady rise. But if you look at real hourly compensation, it's quite flat. And this gap, which is quite problematic, it means that people are unequally exposed to the benefits of technology. This gap is in fact correlated with the Gini coefficient, which is a measure of inequality in a society. My nightmare scenario is that this could potentially lead to species bifurcation. This is where some of humanity starts evolving very differently than the rest of us. And early access to some of these technologies could change the course of human evolution. So are we headed towards exponential inequality? Potentially. This is something that we need to pay attention to. This chart shows average household income. And you see the top 1% they're seeing that exponential growth. The rest of the 99%, not so much. Not so much. But at the same time, I mentioned that technology is empowering all of us, and people seem to be doing what companies used to do, and companies seem to be doing what governments used to do. We'll talk about what governments are doing. This is Stuart Butterfield, who founded Slack, and with a group of 12 coders, this is the active user growth that they saw over the course of a year and a half. In fact, this is not it. Have a look. So this is truly a hyper-exponential growth curve. This was never possible with a small group of people. There's a dip for the holidays, and then it picks back up. Truly amazing. In terms of technological empowerment, we're also seeing the rise of nanoeconomics. What I call nanoeconomics is really the fact that technology is allowing us to measure incremental economic value creation better than ever before. We have macroeconomics, microeconomics, and now we're seeing nanoeconomics, which means you can hire people on these platforms and many other for less than $5. The smallest unit of work has shrunk. And this is great. It means that more people can behave entrepreneurially and be exposed to the upside and also the downside of the market. As a side note, how do you sue somebody for $5? You're unhappy with their work, you paid $5. I did this exercise with a group of lawyers. Immediately, they started brainstorming. The point is not to sue. The point is to rate. We're seeing the rise of the long-term memory of the market, which is very hard to recover from if the market remembers you negatively. All these technologies also have a downside. Have a look at this video, and we'll discuss.
Today, I would like to talk about
change.
Because
Change is
what we are
looking for.
and
we have
changed.
Absolutely everything.
Mind blown.
we're changing the way
People.
Communicate.
We've been changing
the way the world is
Connected.
connected.
We changed the way people are sharing.
Stuff.
We build
Incredible.
exciting, awesome, amazing products
And
Incredible devices. But honestly, the biggest
change
Of all.
is we
Make people give us all
their data.
data
Why?
because
We told them our
amazing products
are for free.
but
in fact all this
will cost them the
Most important
thing, their data.
The journey has just started.
the good news is that
Today, we know
everything
about what
everybody
we will
will be using
all this
information
data
to make a lot
awesome
Incredible.
of money.
and it should be shared across government.
I was hoping you're going to like that.
It's fascinating to watch Europe and the US respond very differently to this question. We're awakening to the reality of how much data is being gathered about us. And Europe has taken the legislative approach, whereas in the US, I fully anticipate class action lawsuits. But the question of who owns what is a good segue to talk about property. I'd like to start this segment with a question for you. What do these three things have in common? They sit idle more than 90% of the time. So the question is, what can you do with that 90%? And the answer is, of course, the sharing economy. These are some of the platforms where you can share different things. And if you look at the common denominator across all these platforms, they're enabling people and companies to share things, services, and time that they have in excess and that they're not utilizing. So I encourage you to reflect on your own organization and ask yourself, what are the things, services, and time that is underutilized? And how can you share those? By the way, if you go through that exercise and you find that there's no platform to do that, build it immediately. That is an immediate market opportunity because chances are other companies pretty soon are going to be looking for that opportunity to share things, services, and time. Quiz number 1. If the world's largest retailer does not have any inventory, what is it that the world's most disruptive insert your business type need not have? What are the things that we hold to be core to our business that in light of exponential change might no longer be as necessary or even relevant? I did this exercise with a group of bankers. It took us about an hour, but the group emerged that money no longer seems to be the core asset for banking. You need to have the infrastructure for the flow of money, but not so much money itself. Quiz number 2. If cars are going to be driving themselves and we can Uber them whenever we need to, what could this potentially do to real estate prices? The moment people don't mind living 5 or 10 minutes further away because their time spent in the car is productive, they can read, they can rest, they can watch that movie, then the supply of viable real estate goes up. Demand is the same, and we could see downward pressure on price. How many people have tried a virtual reality headset? Wonderful. I think by the end of next year, all of you will have. Highly recommended. But virtualization is giving rise to an entirely parallel economy with entirely new asset classes. But first, let me tell you about the home theater of the future. This is a device that you mount when you're wearing the goggles, and it adds the 4th dimension, which is the G-force, the feeling that you get when you're actually moving in these virtual environments. So as the car is turning, you begin to sense what that feels like. If you have the space and the money, this is the way to invest it. I mentioned the parallel economy that is emerging, and most of us are not paying attention to this. This is Planet Calypso, which is a virtual planet that was created in an online game. The planet, a couple of years ago, was sold for more than $6 million. Sounds like a very stupid investment. However, consider this. More than 100% ROI was realized in less than a year. Are we paying attention to this? Are these new types of asset classes on our radar? So in summary, property dynamics. Ownership seems to be going down, virtualization is on the rise, decentralization is on the rise, asset values seem to be compressing, and production costs seem to be going down. If all of these are true, then we're headed towards a very serious oversupply scenario. And depending on which industry you're in, chances are you already feel the pressure from oversupply. Which begs the question, how do you create value in this new world? I have 3 recommendations. These 3 recommendations pivot around technological empowerment and the need to hyper-customize. Number 1 is, I encourage you to reflect on any product or service and ask yourself whether the virtual, digital, connected version of it exists. If not, go build it. That's an immediate business opportunity. We also talk about Uberization of many different industries, the fact that people want what they want exactly when they want it. Just-in-time delivery is a key mode of value creation. And hyper-customization, this is my favorite. By the way, this guy's 3D printed version looks better than himself. That's a reality that might be fast approaching. How many people have played with origami? Excellent. It's a Japanese art form, paper folding. It has very elegant mathematics. A company in New York used the same mathematics to 3D print a dress. And this is fascinating because not only can you decide what the dress looks like, you can also add an extra dimension. You can decide how it moves, something that we were never able to do before. A great example of hyper-customization. Another way that value is being created is through what I call swarm economics, the fact that a large group of people can come together, accomplish something, and then disperse and go on to other projects. On the web, the best example of this is crowdfunding. Eric Majikowski created the Pebble Watch, which is the granddaddy of the Apple Watch, the Samsung Watch. He was ahead of all those guys. On Kickstarter.com, he pre-sold $10 million of his prototype over the course of 5 weeks. That was not enough. That was 2012. He came back in 2015 with a second version, and he raised $20 million in funding on Kickstarter. over the course of 5 weeks. But that is not the record. The record for crowdfunding is with Star Citizen. It's also an online game that hasn't shipped yet, but to this day, they have raised $137 million. Here's what they do. They actually have raised this money, and they ship small modules of the game. And the community gives feedback. They're playing the game, and it is a great model of co-creation. They're developing the whole game together. Truly inspiring. Here's another way that value is being created, and this is a bit counterintuitive. I'm going to play a song for you and then pose a question.
The traffic jam down on the ground, like they need to know we're mad. Please, mother, drive me again.
All right. Who wrote that song? An AI did. A machine wrote that song. I couldn't tell. So Sony has a research and development lab where they fed 13,000 songs to an AI. They made the poor thing listen to 13,000 songs. And by the end of it, the AI could generate music. And in fact, this year, they're set to release an entire album that the machine has created. So this is a mode of value creation that bypasses humanity altogether. Now the question is, are we prepared for that? Moving on to the next P of the 7 Ps, this is the world's most famous graph. Supply, demand, the intersection gives us what? Price. Not anymore. Not anymore. Thanks to the fact that the marginal cost of supply, the cost of creating one more unit of product or service, has gone down, some would argue all the way to zero, you can price discriminate. And the entire area under the supply curve is beginning to be serviceable. That means you should dynamically price your product or service. And these are some of the platforms on the web that started experimenting with this for the first time a while back. They got into hot water because nobody wants to pay a different price. But today, very few online retailers do not price discriminate. The most important message here is to know your customer. But what do you do when you don't have perfect information about their purchasing propensity? There are a few approaches you can take with dynamic pricing. Direct auctions, of course, work. Reverse auctions also work. This is where you start at a high price point and tick the price down, or start at a low price point and tick the price up. Combined with limited supply, you can help the market clear itself at the right price point for each purchaser. But my favorite is the following. Imagine walking up to a shelf in a retail store and the prices are updated. How annoying would that be? In fact, there are startups that are working on affluence detection based on what you're wearing and how you're walking. So watch out, take some classes. Let's talk about power and how in this new world power is changing hands. To this day, we know that Skype has disrupted the telco industry out of around $37 billion. How much of that did Skype capture? Tiny fraction, only $2 billion. So $35 billion is consumer surplus. And right around here, I tell folks, good luck disrupting yourself. Because it involves leaving a lot of money potentially on the table. But if you're late and you're reacting to change as opposed to being proactive about it, you might no longer be in the market. So it's a dilemma, and we will unpack this over the next 2 days. But let's talk about different types of businesses that you could be in and how much market power you will command. The first type of business is a content business. A content business is very tough. You don't have a lot of market power because the marginal cost of copying content has gone to zero. You don't pay anything to copy that file. In fact, 8 out of 10 Oscar-nominated movies this year were available online in full high definition before they were released. So it's a tough business. It doesn't mean you cannot make money. It simply means you don't have a lot of market power. Further up the power chain, you have a product or service. This is where most of us play in. You have more power than the content business, but less power than a platform. And I define a platform as a value bridge. You're connecting 2 or multiple sides of the market. You're allowing for value to flow. You don't need to deliver that value directly. You're the bridge. And if you manage to intertwine and combine, interlock multiple platforms, you end up with an ecosystem. And there are very few ecosystems in the world. The best example, of course, Google and Facebook are trying, but the best example is WeChat out of China. Encourage you to look into that. So let's look at the S&P 500 and the entries and exits from the index of 500 largest companies in the US since 2002. On the right-hand side, you see the exits, and very few of these companies are platforms. Most of them are product or service or content businesses. On the left, you have the entries, and you'll notice many of them are platforms. You have E-Trade, Netflix, Google, Amazon, and the list goes on. So the question is, how do you move from a product or service model to a platform model? And this is counterintuitive, but the headline version is you need to think about the lives of your competitors and find ways to make their lives easier. In the process of doing that, you forego the profitability of your product or service, but you establish yourself as the de facto standard and the platform, and then you'll enjoy more market power over the long term. Here's an example of this. Google released TensorFlow, which is their AI library. They spent millions of dollars developing this. They released it to the public. They said, here's our tool, go use it. They're trying to become the AI platform of the future. And in the process, they're foregoing the product or service revenue that they might have had. Here's another example. The founder of Tesla released their intellectual property to the public. They said, go ahead, use this. And what he had to say about it is very informative. We believe that Tesla, other companies making electric cars, and the world would all benefit from a common, rapidly evolving technology platform. So platform wars are approaching, and you need to be ready. If the marginal cost of supply is going down, and the marginal cost of demand is also going down, thanks to the internet, your addressable market has never been as addressable as it is today. If these two are true, then we're going to see a rise in market power velocity. The fact that power is changing hands faster than ever before, and companies are rising to the billion-dollar mark faster than ever before and falling from multi-billion-dollar valuations more quickly than we have ever seen. So in light of all this exponential change, the question is, what should your reaction be? A lot of companies over-index on IQ. They believe intelligence is the answer. But recent research has shown that beyond the first 2 years on the job, IQ actually does not predict success. Let me say that again. IQ does not seem to be predicting success. So what are we missing? I've invented the concept of AQ for adaptability quotient. If the world is changing exponentially fast, then your ability to respond to that change quickly is the strongest predictor of your success. And in our research, we're finding very encouraging trends. We bring people into the lab to run the experiment of measuring their AQ. What do you think happens when you tell somebody you're about to measure their AQ? They start behaving more adaptively, which is very annoying. We're trying to measure the thing. But it is great news for humanity. Unlike IQ, AQ seems to be highly coachable. That means you don't need to fire anybody because they have low AQ in your assessment. You need to coach them and nurture them. And here's another insight from our research so far. Every organization out there is looking for stability. We're noticing that the strongest predictor of AQ and to the extent to which you'll enjoy stability is your ability to unlearn. Your past success is getting in the way of your future success. The ability to unlearn is emerging as a core competency that companies need to focus on. So I encourage you to reflect on what you might need to unlearn as you hear about different technologies and different trends over the course of the conference. All right, let's talk about policy, a very important topic. Let's do an exercise. Let's say you are the CEO of the country's largest shampoo manufacturer. You have an R&D budget, you divide your R&D team into 2 groups, and you give them 6 months to come back to you with a new product. Team A comes back with the same formula, but they've made it more watery. Meaning, as people pour shampoo on their head, more of it is going to drip down, and people need to buy more shampoo. Classic technique. And it works, to a certain extent. Team B comes back with a new product, with a new formula, that happens to cure cancer. Okay, stay with me. You're having dinner with the finance minister of the country. Which product does she want you to launch? Specifically, what is the impact on the GDP? Type A increases GDP, whereas type B decreases it. I call this the growth fallacy. The fact that most of our policymakers are tunnel visioned on GDP as the best measure of the economic well-being of a society. Type B destroys an entire supply chain, and that is not a bad thing. By very definition, disruptive technologies do that. And we need to find models that encourage that, as opposed to score them negatively. Here's another challenge in the policy world these days, the D word. D stands for deflation. There's currently around $13 trillion of negative yielding government bonds in circulation. What do you get when you print a lot of money and you push interest rates to the negative territory? You should get inflation. But a lot of countries are not seeing what is considered healthy inflation. My contention is exponential technologies, these disruptive technologies, are by definition making things cheaper, faster, and more accessible. So there is massive technological deflationary forces in play. On the other hand, we're printing a lot of money trying to cause inflation, and the two seem to be canceling each other out. In fact, I believe we're going to look back at this period in human history and see it as a demarcation between the inflationary era and the deflationary era. And deflation is good. Deflation is the mother of innovation. If you're trying to solve cancer, wouldn't you love to go to bed, wake up, and every morning everything has become cheaper? You'll have a longer runway. You can make and place more bets. So we need to rephrase and reconsider our approach here. But let's go a little deeper into one policy area, self-driving cars. We know that self-driving cars are going to dramatically reduce accidents. Today, they seem to be on average around 2 orders of magnitude safer than the average driver. We also know that we're headed towards technological unemployment for a lot of different types of drivers. And finally, this is already shown that with Uber and Lyft and car sharing, people are going to buy fewer cars. Let's put some numbers on these trends. Unemployed drivers, that's going to be roughly about 1% of the workforce. People not buying as many cars, that's going to be probably around 2% of GDP. And this part is very counterintuitive and sad. In most modern countries, 3% of the GDP comes from the death and destruction of car accidents. The moment you take care of that, what is left? I met 3 prime ministers last year, and I can tell you, none of them are ready for this world and the implications for our societies. More specifically, technological unemployment is something we need to respond to very proactively. And a famous figure, Martin Luther King, had a solution. He wrote a book about this. He said, "I am now convinced that the simplest solution to poverty is to abolish it directly by," anybody know what he said? Universal basic income. He wrote a book about this 1 year before he was assassinated. In fact, there are people who believe this is the reason why he was assassinated. Now, how many people believe that folks are going to become lazier when they're given a minimum basic income? Let's see a show of hands. That seems to be the major concern, and it's a valid concern. So there have been recent studies, around 20 of them, that implemented UBI at a local geography and looked at the results. Here's the amazing outcome. Entrepreneurship shoots up typically 3x, 3-fold increase in entrepreneurship. And this makes sense. Think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. When people are covered for their basic needs, their risk appetite goes up, and they have a higher propensity to start businesses. And that is a good thing. All right, let me attempt to summarize around 10,000 years of economic history in one sentence. In fact, it's not even a full sentence. I think it's about adding certainty to an uncertain world. Every economic system in human history rewards those who create certainty in an uncertain world. And I think there is no better measure of certainty in our lives than this. For the first time in human history, extreme poverty levels have fallen below 20%. This is very encouraging and directionally correct. It's a little too slow for my taste, but we do seem to be seeing an accelerating trend. And on the note of adding certainty to our lives, Bitcoin and blockchain has a major role to play, in my opinion. You're going to hear a lot about these Bitcoin, of course, and these other cryptocurrencies. They're both currencies and commodities. You can invest in them. They have a public ledger. Deflationary. Over time, your purchasing power goes up, as opposed to fiat currencies where your purchasing power goes down over time because of inflation. Very volatile, around 18 times more volatile than gold, 7 times more volatile than the US dollar, and highly secured. You do not need to trust a middleman. But more important than cryptocurrencies themselves is the blockchain technology behind it. And I want to give you an example, a very concrete example of what you can do with smart contracts. Think about a typical contract that has been in use throughout human history. In order to have a contract with somebody, you need to trust them, and you need to have an enforcement mechanism if things go wrong. Blockchain technology is showing us a path to where you bypass both. Enforcement is automatic, and you do not need to trust your counterparty. Let me give you a very concrete example. You're driving on the highway. Maybe you're not driving on the highway, your car is driving itself. But you're in a rush. And the speed lane, the fast lane, is quite busy. What if your car offered some bitcoins to the car in the front to clear the lane? And if and when the cars clear the lane, the contract is settled automatically. Enforcement is automatic, and you do not need to trust the cars in the front. We'll see more examples like this throughout the conference. Which brings me to a note on prosperity and our well-being. Before we watch this video, let me invite you, to go through an exercise with me. And I apologize, this is a bit of a morbid exercise. Think about people in this room. Think about people around you right now. And ask yourself, how will these people die? Statistically, we have an answer to that. More than half of us in this room are going to die from some form of cardiovascular disease, heart failure. Have a look at this video. There's some surgical imagery of a pig's heart. Have a look. This is the global military spend. This is the budget for this project. You can make 20 million attempts at solving a problem that is going to kill more than half of us. And let me tell you, no innovation in human history has taken 20 million attempts. We usually figure it out sooner. So why is this not happening? What can we do to make sure it happens? All right, at this point, I'd like to do a quick check-in. How many people feel like this right now? Let's see a show of hands. Great. How many people feel this way?